Quality proteins aren't just for special occasions. With Omaha Steaks, you get unbeatable flavor and value delivered right to your door. They have an unmatched selection of perfectly portioned proteins, including USDA-certified tender steaks, burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, and more. All flash frozen at their moment of peak quality, then quickly delivered to your door in a dependable cooler. So a great dinner is just minutes away. From Taco Tuesday to a weekend feast. Omaha Steaks practically invented meat delivery, and they've been perfecting the art of premium proteins for over 100 years. With their 100% satisfaction guarantee, you can order with complete confidence. Taste the Omaha Steaks difference, a better, more convenient way to buy proteins. Start getting flavorful proteins delivered today. Visit omahasteaks.com and get $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, code AUDIO. Terms apply. See site for details.
The world is buzzing with AI tools, but instead of making things easier, they've made things overwhelming. There's a better way. Meet Superhuman, the AI productivity suite that gives you superpowers so you can outsmart the work chaos. With Grammarly, Mail, and Coda working together, you get proactive help across your workflow, no matter how you work. Experience AI that meets you right where you are. Unleash your superhuman potential today. Learn more at superhuman.com/podcast. That's superhuman.com/podcast.
In the past, I have been unflinching in my critique of videos about MH370 made by other YouTubers. Well, today the shoe is on the other foot. I am now on the receiving end of a YouTube video about me and my efforts to explain MH370. I'm someone who has always ascribed to the notion that turnabout is fair play. So today I'm going to respond to that video. In fact, I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to watch that video with you in real time right here, right now. Hi folks, Jeff Wise back with you for another episode of Finding MH370, the only podcast in the world that goes deep into the real technical evidence of the case with the help of leading subject matter experts from around the world. I'm here not just to talk about the mystery, I'm here to solve the mystery. A bit of a departure today from the usual format because I'm going to be watching a video that somebody else made. This is from an account called Aviation Files. It went up a month ago. Some friends of the podcast turned me on to it. As far as I know, it's the first time anyone has done a third-party critique of my work. And of course, I'm interested to see how the ideas that I've been developing have been making their way out into the broader information ecosystem. So I'm going to watch this. I'm going to give you my reaction, both emotionally and intellectually. You can watch for yourself in real time as that happens. Before we get started, I just want to make a quick shout out to the new paid Substack subscribers, Suzanne Storm, John Lehman, and Ron Moore, and also to the new paid YouTube member, Michael T. Boyle. And I also want to thank, all the subscribers and members who continue to support the show and have been supporting the show for a long time. I'm so grateful for your support. Just a reminder, paid subscribers and members get access to unique content both on Facebook and at the Substack show page at findingmh370.com, where you get a free newsletter that goes out with each episode. Also, I've got a new poll question up for everybody on YouTube. This is a test of your core MH370 knowledge. Have you been paying attention? Do you know these important facts that you need to understand in order to understand the mystery and figure out what happened to the plane? I've put a direct link in the pinned comment below on the YouTube page. You can click through and vote instantly. And then final thing I want to mention, I just had a birthday and my wife made me a shirt that says, "Lepus don't lie." There was some controversy within the family as to whether this creature is an actual Lepus antitifera or some other member of the goose barnacle family. I don't want to weigh in right now. It's a little bit contentious. So let's get on to the main course. It's time to watch MH370. What if it never crashed? Feel free to add your own comments as we go along. this is a first time for me doing something like this. So bear with me. I'm going to try to get this underway.
It's been over 12 years since the disappearance of flight MH370. 3 massive searches, more than $200 million spent, and on March 8, 2026, Ocean Infinity officially called off their last search. Their CEO, Oliver Plunkett, essentially admitted what no one in the official investigation wanted to say. Maybe the plane simply isn't where we've been looking. But one man wasn't surprised. A journalist named Jeff Wise had been saying exactly that for over a decade. The aviation industry laughed at him. His own research group kicked him out. CNN stopped calling him for interviews. Netflix turned him into a punchline. But in 2026, after every search came back empty, after new scientific evidence started backing up his claims, more people are starting to wonder if Jeff Wise was right all along. But before we get into...
All right, I have to pause it because I don't want to be talking over this guy. But most of what they're saying is true. Oliver Plunkett did make that statement. They did call off the search. All of that is right. I mean, I would somewhat take issue with the idea that it made me into a laughingstock. I mean, it's one thing to disagree with somebody or to ridicule them, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're a laughingstock. But a more important thing that I think that's really interesting is that there is real footage of things in here. There's a picture of me that's actually me, but a lot of this stuff is AI generated. I pretty much know all of the video footage that is out there that's related to this case, and there's some in here that it's not real. And so I'm starting this out with like a little bit of hesitation because they seem to know what they're talking about, whoever they is. But at the same time, they are generating stuff that is not real. So let's keep watching.
Why people are starting to believe him, we need to go back to 2015 and understand why the entire aviation industry once thought he'd lost his mind.
None of this is actually real. Imagery is not real.
Jeff Wise had the kind of resume that made people take him seriously. Harvard educated, licensed pilot who'd flown everything from gliders to Soviet jet fighters. When MH370 vanished, 2014, CNN brought him on as their primary aviation analyst. At the peak of the coverage, he was appearing on air up to 6 times a day. The face America saw whenever it wanted answers about the missing plane.
Okay, have to pause it. That is true. I did go on CNN a lot. I was not like the main person. I was not who America turned to. But I did go on. So a bit of an overstatement.
He was also a member of the Independent Group, a small, respected team of around a dozen satellite engineers and aviation professionals running their own parallel investigation.
True, but this picture is not real. This is AI. So it's a mixture of... I mean, okay, so it's being generated with, the images are illustrative, maybe, but not real. So
while official agencies in Malaysia stumbled through contradictions and sat on radar data for days, the Independent Group was doing the real analytical work behind the scenes, and Wise was one of them. Then,
that's a real image.
He did something that got him expelled and turned into a global punchline overnight. While everyone else was calculating where in the southern Indian
global punchline, really?
Ocean the plane had hit the water, Wise started asking a completely different question. Not where the plane crashed, but whether the data pointing south could be trusted at all. Here's the background. After MH370 disappeared from radar, the only evidence it flew south came from the plane's communication system, which was still exchanging automatic signals with the Inmarsat satellite network.
Okay, really, really, really important mistake here, that it was still communicating. This is a drone that I've been reading for 12 years. It was not still transmitting. It was turned off and turned back on again. That changes everything to being a million times more suspicious than it otherwise would be. Small thing, very important thing.
Even after someone on board had switched off the transponder and voice radios. Scientists analyzed tiny shifts in the frequency of those signals, shifts caused by the plane's speed and direction, and concluded MH370 had traveled south into the Indian Ocean. That analysis, and nothing else, is the reason every search for the past 12 years has focused on the Southern Ocean. Jeff Wise argued those frequency readings were fake, that someone had tampered with the plane's satellite equipment to send false signals.
Okay, another small thing, but I think it's worth saying. I didn't say it was fake. I said it could be fake. I'm trying to argue for a possible alternate explanation. This might seem like a very hair-splitting difference, but I think it's really important to understand how science should work. And it's not just people saying, I'm right, you're wrong. So that's not what I'm doing. And I think it's important to, again, a small but important distinction.
Creating a digital ghost trail pointing south while the real aircraft went in the opposite direction. In early 2015, he published a long investigative feature for New York Magazine. The headline basically asked readers, am I out of my mind for thinking I know where this plane actually is? His answer was a place nobody had considered, Kazakhstan. Specifically,
okay, I have to say, yes, of course people had considered Kazakhstan until the BFO data was processed. And when the only thing that they understood was the BTO data, they knew from the get-go that it was either the southern Indian Ocean or Kazakhstan. So I did not dream up the idea of saying Kazakhstan. That is baked into the data, and it was really obvious from the get-go.
A disused airstrip called Yubileyny inside the Baikonur Cosmodrome, a massive space launch facility leased and operated by Russia. His theory worked like this. On a Boeing 777, there's a compartment beneath the first-class cabin floor that houses the plane's main electronics and satellite communication equipment, accessible through a trap door in the cabin. Wise pointed out that 3 passengers with Russian and Ukrainian passports were seated in the forward section of the aircraft, close to that trap door. He argued,
okay, technically, the Russian was seated next to it. The Ukrainians were further back.
Russian operatives accessed the compartment mid-flight, tampered with the satellite unit, and fed it false data, making it look like the plane was heading south when it was actually flying north, hugging national borders to avoid radar, and ultimately landing at Baikonur.
Okay, first of all, the hugging the radar, that is not my that we know that happened. That was from the Malaysian primary radar. That comes before the supposed turn back to the ocean or heading north. And again, it's like if the plane didn't go into the Southern Ocean, it went to Kazakhstan. It not necessarily Baikonur. Baikonur is where I spent a lot of time looking, but I never said that it had to go to Yubileyny. I proposed Yubileyny as a possible. I now think it probably went further east if it did go to Kazakhstan.
Backed it up with satellite imagery. Google Earth showed that something roughly the size of a 777 had been built on the Yubileyny runway, an airstrip abandoned for decades in the months before MH370 disappeared. Then suddenly, 4 months before MH370 vanished, construction activity appears on a
Okay, this is a fascinating picture. I don't know where this picture came from, but I spent so much time looking at pictures of this construction site, and I've never seen this image. It's cool. If it turns to be from that project, I mean, a part of me would always love to know what the heck they were doing in the desert in the months before MH370 disappeared. But even at the time that article was published, I didn't think that it was there. Probably one of my greatest mistakes of all time was to write a sidebar for New York Magazine about how I had gone down this rabbit hole thinking that it might be at this pile of dirt in Yubileyny. And I explained why I had decided that wasn't the case. But a lot of people sort of didn't read the whole thing and just thought, oh, he thinks it went to Yubileyny and there's this pile of dirt. There is a really interesting pile of dirt. I don't know why it's there, but I don't think that MH370 is actually in it.
Used Russian runway. A structure goes up. A month after the disappearance, the area appeared cleared and the structure demolished. Whatever was there had been erased. Wise published the before and after satellite comparisons. The timing was either an extraordinary coincidence or it wasn't. Its suspected motive was a massive geopolitical distraction. MH370 disappeared on March 8, 2014, days after Russia annexed Crimea. The global news cycle pivoted overnight from Ukraine to the missing plane. And 4 months later, another Malaysia Airlines jet flight MH17, was shot down over eastern Ukraine by a Russian military missile. All 298 people on board died. 2 Malaysian airliners destroyed within 5 months of each other. Wise framed all of it within Russia's known strategy of asymmetric warfare, deniable operations designed to create confusion and divert Western attention. He didn't see coincidence, he saw a pattern. Now, here's where we need to be completely fair, because the aviation community didn't just disagree with Wise. They tore his theory apart piece by piece. The independent group expelled him. One member called it garbage. Malaysia Airlines' former crisis director said it's physically impossible to fly a 777 from that electronics compartment. You can disable systems from down there, but you cannot control the aircraft. Mike Exner, a prominent investigator, made a critical technical point. The satellite frequency data Wise claimed was faked isn't actually generated on the plane at all. It's measured at Inmarsat ground station in Perth, Australia. If that's true...
Okay, what? I don't know exactly what Mike Exner said, but to say that the BFO data is not generated on board the plane is simply wrong. I mean, the BFO value is a result of the satellite data unit runs a thing called the Doppler precompensation algorithm that sends out, it alters the frequency of the satellite transmission, which then, combined with the relative motion of the plane and the satellite, create what ultimately is recorded as the BFO value. So, in a sense, the BFO value is a result of what's generated on the plane and the external conditions, but we know what those external conditions are, at least in terms of the motion of the satellite, and so everything else can be deduced. So if he's saying that, oh, this is impossible because there's no way to change the BFO value on the plane, that is just bonkers. And, here's a side note. Mike Exner for years has been complaining, oh, what Jeff's doing is ludicrous, it's ridiculous. I say, how is it ridiculous? How is it ludicrous? Tell me why it's wrong. You're supposedly the satellite communications expert. If what I'm talking about is impossible, just tell us why it's impossible. Stop using these, emotionally loaded words and tell me what the problem is. And he has refused to do that. So he's complained a lot. He hasn't really given an explanation. And it really kind of ticks me off when I hear this yet again. Oh, Mike Exner says it's ridiculous. Tell me how it's ridiculous. What this video is saying is simply not true. Of course, the BFO value is a result of what happens on board the plane. It can, of course, be spoofed. I don't think there's very little disagreement at this point that it's spoofable, whether it was done or not, because it would be very complicated. It would be a major undertaking. That's a separate issue. But this is simply inaccurate.
You can't tamper with it from inside the aircraft. Richard Godfrey raised what many consider the hardest question for Wise's theory. If the plane never crashed in the Indian Ocean, someone would have had to plant wreckage across 7 countries in 27 locations for 14 different people to independently discover over years. It's the fair point. And
why? I don't know. I mean, planting debris is not hard at all. And first of all, I have critiqued Richard Godfrey before and will do again. And most of these pieces of debris were found by a single guy who lied about his connections to Russia. That has been established without, I think, much controversy. And to say that, like, there's all these pieces of debris, they were found in all these different countries, that is much, much easier than the part about altering the BFO value and everything like that.
And it's one Wise has spent years trying to answer, which we'll get to shortly. Okay. Russia Today ran segments accusing Wise of anti-Russia propaganda, but there was one piece of evidence that hit Wise's theory harder than anything else. 3 pieces of recovered debris were confirmed through Boeing serial numbers as belonging to the exact aircraft that operated MH370. For those parts to exist on those beaches, parts of that plane were genuinely in the Indian Ocean at some point. That's physical evidence you can't wave away. Wise didn't deny that. He never claimed the debris was fake. What he argued was even more controversial, that whoever took the plane kept pieces of the aircraft, held them for months, and then deliberately placed them into the Indian Ocean so they'd drift ashore and make the world believe the crash happened in the Southern Ocean. It was the most extreme claim anyone had made about MH370 and did.
Okay, why is that an extreme claim? I mean, no, I actually disagree. I think that my claim that the BFO data was deliberately tampered with is a far more extreme claim. That is an extraordinarily difficult and technically sophisticated undertaking, which I understand why people are skeptical that took place. It requires an opponent who is extraordinarily capable and malevolent.
Quality proteins aren't just for special occasions. With Omaha Steaks, you get unbeatable flavor and value delivered right to your door. They have an unmatched selection of perfectly portioned proteins, including USDA certified tender steaks, burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, and more. All flash frozen at their moment of peak quality. Then quickly delivered to your door in a dependable cooler. So a great dinner is just minutes away. From Taco Tuesday to a weekend feast. Omaha Steaks practically invented meat delivery, and they've been perfecting the art of premium proteins for over 100 years. With their 100% satisfaction guarantee, you can order with complete confidence. Taste the Omaha Steaks difference, a better, more convenient way to buy proteins. Start getting flavorful proteins delivered today. Visit omahasteaks.com and get $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, code AUDIO. Terms apply. See site for details.
To imagine that somebody would take this plane and then strip pieces off and put them in the ocean to be found, that seems to be like, well, yeah, why wouldn't you do that? That seems to be kind of a no-brainer, actually.
In 2023, Netflix decided to put it on screen. Netflix gave Wise a prominent role in their 3-part documentary, dedicating most of the second episode to his theory. The series went viral with tens of millions of viewers worldwide, and paradoxically, made his reputation even worse. Aviation professionals lined up to criticize the documentary. David Mearns called it dominated by ridiculous and unsupported theories. For most...
I mean, again, it's like, you don't like the theory... Unsupported. I mean, listen, this podcast series that you're watching has like 90 episodes by now. I'm going through all of the evidence. People don't like it. The extent to which people are made uncomfortable by my theory is a fact of human reality that I can't really explain. People seem to be completely comfortable with any other theory, from lithium batteries to unripe mangosteens to, AWACS planes that are also electronic warfare platforms. I mean, almost anything seems to be acceptable. But the idea that a cyber attack could be carried out on a passenger plane just seems to really rile people up. I mean, this documentary that we're watching is not wrong in saying that it like really worked people up to hear this. But again, it's like, why are people so, if you want to raise a specific objection, then do so. There are completely legitimate problems with my theory that I'm happy to discuss. But if David Mearns, I mean, come on.
People who discovered Jeff Wise through Netflix, he was permanently filed under conspiracy theorist, and then he went quiet. Not because he gave up, because he realized arguing on TV would never prove anything, but something else might. What most people don't know is that between Netflix and his 2026 research, Wise never stopped working. He launched a podcast called Deep Dive MH370 that built a dedicated following of people who wanted real technical analysis instead of sensational headlines. He was corresponding regularly with marine biologists, drift modelers, and satellite engineers, reading every French judicial document and Australian Transport Safety Bureau report he could access. And, over several years, he shifted his entire approach, from debating what existing data meant to collecting new data that nobody else had. And the data he was after had nothing to do with satellites or radar. It had to do with something growing on the first piece of MH370 wreckage ever recovered. When the flaperon, a piece of the plane's wing, washed ashore on Réunion, a French island in the Indian Ocean, in July 2015, it was covered in small sea creatures called gooseneck barnacles. The useful thing about these barnacles is that they grow at a predictable rate, so their size can tell you roughly how long something has been floating in the ocean. They latch onto anything floating in the ocean the moment it enters the water, and they grow at a measurable rate. The bigger they are, the longer the object has been drifting. So, if the plane crashed on March 8th, 2014, and the flaperon was found in July 2015, the barnacles on it should represent roughly 16 months of continuous growth. But
okay, here I'm going to say, actually, he's being a little bit too generous regarding the work. This is a real image, by the way. Or it looks pretty real to me anyway. I'm not 100% confident about AI anymore. The idea is that LIPUS can be measured, but we don't know exactly how reliable of a method it is. That's what I'm currently in the process of continuing to explore. So I think this might be actually overstating the strength of my argument. It is definitely clear that the largest barnacles on this piece were smaller than barnacles on pieces that had been in the water less time. But is it possible that something could be in the water for 15 months and grow barnacles this size? I'm not at this point ready to say that that's impossible. I would definitely say that it is consistent with a planting scenario, but it doesn't necessarily mean that only a planting scenario is valid.
But they didn't. The largest barnacles on the flaperon were about 36 millimeters, but earlier research had already shown that was a problem. Martin Stelfox, founder of the Olive Ridley project, grew these exact same barnacles on buoys in the Maldives and found they reached 35 millimeters in just 105 days, which is 3.5 months. And they were still growing when he ended the experiment. The waters he tested in are the same current system the flaperon would have traveled through. Cynthia Venn, an environmental science professor at Bloomsburg University, estimated the barnacles on flaperons were less than 6 months old. Japanese researcher Yoichi Yusa put it at somewhere between 2 weeks and a few months. 2 weeks to 6 months on debris that supposedly spent 16 months in the water. That gap doesn't make sense unless you consider Wise's theory. If the wreckage was held on land and placed into the ocean months after the plane disappeared, the barnacles would have only started growing at the moment of placement, which means they'd be exactly as young as they are. Not a mystery, a prediction confirmed. Growth rates can vary depending on ocean conditions, and the French authorities still haven't released their largest specimens to independent researchers, but the chemistry pointed in the same direction. Barnacle shells grow in layers, and each layer locks in the temperature of the water it grew in, almost like a diary of where the object has been floating. In 2025, a research team at Kuwait University studied one of the barnacles from the flaperon. The temperature recorded in its shell showed that the flaperon had spent its last few months drifting over 1,000 miles away from where the plane supposedly crashed, close to Réunion itself, not near the search zone, near where the piece actually washed up. Then there was the waterline problem. These barnacles only grow underwater. They die if exposed.
These are not Lepus anatifer barnacles. These are things called acorn barnacles that grow on the shore, not floating.
To air. But when French researchers put the flaperon in a tank, it floated with roughly half its surface above the waterline. Yet barnacles covered every surface, top, bottom.
That is, look at this. That is not real. Leading edge, trailing edge, yeah, and it's covered in acorn barnacles. This is bad AI. This kind of makes me cringe.
Leading edge, trailing edge, healthy populations growing on surfaces that should have been in open air for over a year. Pierre Daniel, a Météo France researcher, ran hundreds of thousands of drift simulations in a confidential report. If the flaperon floated high and caught the wind, the drift math worked. It could have come from the search zone. But if it floated submerged, which the barnacle coverage demanded, the simulations showed it could not have originated from anywhere near the supposed crash site. Jim Carlton, the marine biologist who invented bioforensics by studying organisms on Japanese tsunami debris, was blunt. Barnacles don't lie. They don't grow in air. If
Actually,
the
he
whole
said
piece was
Lepus don't
colonized,
lie.
it was submerged.
Lepus don't lie.
And it wasn't just the flaperon. Over the years, roughly 3 dozen pieces of suspected MH370 wreckage turned up across the Western Indian Ocean, Réunion, Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania, South Africa, Mauritius. Not one showed 16 months of growth. A cabin closet door had nearly 400 barnacles, but the largest were just 20 millimeters, about 50 days of growth. A piece on Rodriguez Island, same size,
That's
same
not Rodriguez
impossible
Island.
timeline.
That's
A fragment at Mossel Bay in South Africa was
That's
found,
Mossel Bay.
photographed, let go, and rediscovered 3 months later, stripped completely clean. Compare that to what real long-term ocean drift looks like. A Japanese fishing skiff swept out by the 2011 tsunami and recovered 15 months later in Washington state was so densely encrusted with marine life, barnacles, mussels, algae, entire ecosystems, that the original hull was invisible. 15 months in the Pacific produced a floating
Very
reef.
different,
16
different
months
body of water.
in the Indian Ocean supposedly produced sparse patches of young barnacles. And if you want an aviation comparison, look at Air France 447. That plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean in 2009. Deep water, over 4,000 meters, actually deeper than the MH370 search zone. Within 5 days, search teams had recovered bodies, seats, luggage, a leather briefcase, and located a massive visible debris field on the ocean's surface. That's what happens when a wide-body aircraft hits the ocean. You find things quickly. MH370 produced a single wing fragment 16 months later on an island 4,000 kilometers from where it supposedly crashed. And after 12 years, that fragment and a handful of small structural pieces scattered across 2 continents is all we have. That's not the debris pattern of a normal ocean crash. If Wise is right, if different pieces were placed into the ocean at different times, this is exactly what you'd see. Each piece growing barnacles only from the moment it hit the water. Some in for 50 days, some for a few months, none close to 16 months.
True.
Jeff Wise was also doing something to put real weight behind his theory. He was going out to beaches himself, physically collecting old ocean tracking devices that had washed ashore across the Indian and Pacific Oceans.
Okay, small distinction. I myself did not physically go. I would track the things on the web, and then when they came ashore, I would call local people and ask them to collect it for me. So it's the gist of it is true, but I was not globetrotting.
And his method was elegant. Those ocean tracking buoys he'd been collecting from beaches, each one has a known launch date and a precise record of how long it's spent in the water, sometimes months, sometimes years. When they wash ashore, the barnacles growing on them become natural controls. Real-world specimens growing on objects with verified,
That's real footage we
documented
got.
histories. You know exactly how long those barnacles had to grow, in what waters, at what temperatures. Compare those growth patterns to what's on the MH370 debris, and you finally have an answer based on evidence. He collected more than a dozen buoys, compared the growth patterns to each buoy's known timeline. He built this data set from scratch because nobody else had bothered to. Not the Australian investigators who spent years running computer drift models. Not the French who had the actual barnacle specimens locked in custody. Not the Malaysian government. The one piece of original fieldwork that could actually settle the debate, and a journalist did it alone. The result confirmed what every marine biologist had quietly said for a decade. The real-world growth from his trackers didn't match the MH370 debris timeline.
Okay, I just want to say that he's making a really good point. People have been criticizing me. The authorities have said, yeah, this is what must have happened. And there have been these opportunities to go out and check. You can check and to see, is Jeff's crazy idea really crazy? Let's go get some data. Anybody can go get this data. Anybody could go get this data. I'm the only one that's getting this data. Why is that? Why is everyone complaining and making videos and, casting aspersions, and they could be doing the work? And I would add, I think I didn't pause it to talk about this very much, but yeah, the whole issue of where on the flapper on the barnacles grow, I think could really put a nail in the coffin of this whole thing. And as those who've been watching this show for a while have known, I tried to raise money. I went through all the process of locating a flaperon, getting someone who said they were going to sell it to me, somebody who's going to add instrumentation to it. It was all set. It was all lined up. I just need to raise some money, $50,000, which is a tiny fraction of 1% of the money that was spent on the seabed search. And I got $3,000 to pledge. And I'm grateful to all those people who pledged that money to help. But it kind of just goes to show that there's a lot of complaining going on and there's not a lot of actual action. And if we had a little bit of resources to actually try to solve this mystery, we could make great progress. But a lot of people would rather just say, oh, Jeff Wise is crazy. This is like, how could he possibly say that? He's a laughingstock. listen, let's get to work. Let's roll up our sleeves. There's all kinds of data. And this video so far has been talking a lot about the barnacles specifically, but obviously that's not, there's all kinds of different angles to look at. And as you have heard in this series, and as you will continue to hear.
Barnacles are too young, by the better part of a year, exactly the gap his planted debris theory predicts. The plane was carrying 221 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries from Motorola in the...
Okay, what? I don't understand why lithium batteries in the hold are related to anything that we've just been talking about. So anyway, that was a big non sequitur.
Forward cargo hold, right next to the electronics compartment. Similar lithium fires caused sudden silence and total loss of control in UPS Flight 6 and Asiana Flight 991.
Okay, that might be true, but we know that MH370 didn't catch fire because none of these other planes you're talking about flew for 6 hours. If a plane catches fire and burns, it ends very badly, very quickly. And if you want to talk about some kind of scenario where the flight crew gets incapacitated and it goes on as a ghost flight, we also know for a variety of reasons that it was not a ghost flight. So we are completely out on a random tangent right now.
One piece of debris found in Madagascar showed clear burn marks.
No, it didn't. Blaine Gibson claimed that it showed burn marks, and the authorities said that no, it did not.
Flagged as possible MH370, but never investigated. An oil rig worker named Mike McKay reported seeing a plane on fire that night over...
Nobody takes this report seriously.
The South China Sea. His report was filed, dismissed, never followed up.
It should have been dismissed.
That's not the only thing that's being quietly buried. Even after 12 years, 4 governments, Malaysia, Australia, China, and the United States, have never released any new raw data. Malaysia's Prime Minister at the time, Najib Razak, was later found guilty by Malaysian courts in the 1MDB scandal. Billions of dollars missing from the country's own development fund while he was in power. The same government that gave false information about radar contact in the first 48 hours has never stopped controlling the narrative. Compare this to Amelia Earhart. For nearly 90 years, the world accepted a simple explanation. Engine trouble over the Pacific, a crash somewhere near Howland Island, and 2 people swallowed by the ocean. Governments classified key evidence, Navy records, intelligence reports, witness testimonies, and kept them sealed for decades. Searches focused on the open ocean around her planned route. When those documents were finally declassified in 2025, the picture that emerged was completely different. The evidence pointed toward Earhart and her navigator being captured by the Japanese.
What? This is so completely out of left field. It's so discouraging to me because this show was pretty accurate, actually, and pretty comprehensive. And then this is really sad. This is garbage right now.
His military after landing in the Marshall Islands, not crashing into the sea at all. 80 years of looking in the wrong place because the people who had the answers refused to share them.
I love this that the CIA has Xeroxed or printed out a little CIA logo and then cut it out with scissors and taped it onto a folder. This whole image is probably AI, but it's I shouldn't.
Hard not to see the parallels. The families of the 239 people on board are still waiting. Voice 370, the group that represents them, has begged Malaysia not to abandon the search. There are no confirmed plans to go back. None of this proves Jeff Wise was right about Kazakhstan. The technical objections haven't gone away. Nobody has demonstrated a method to fake the satellite data from inside the aircraft.
Whoa, what? Oh, hang on. Nobody's what?
There are no confirmed plans to go back. None of this proves Jeff Wise was right about Kazakhstan. The technical objections haven't gone away.
Yes, they have gone away. None of those technical objections make any sense.
Nobody has demonstrated a method to fake the satellite data from...
Yes, we have demonstrated a method for faking the satellite data, and we've demonstrated a method for flying the plane from the electronics bay.
Inside the aircraft. 3 confirmed Boeing serial numbers mean parts of this plane were in the ocean, and planting wreckage across 7 countries for random civilians to find over years is extraordinarily hard to accept.
No, it is not extraordinarily hard to accept. It's very easy to accept. It would be not. Come on,
Those are serious problems with
they're not serious problems.
his specific theory, but his theory made two specific, testable predictions. First, the debris would show signs of being placed in the water months after the disappearance. Second, the plane wouldn't be found on the southern Indian Ocean seabed. The idea that Russia hijacked a passenger jet and landed it in Central Asia still sounds almost impossible to believe.
There's another thing that it predicted, actually. It predicted that there was a very capable, very aggressive, and very malevolent opponent out there in the world that would potentially wreak more havoc. And that is exactly what happened. MH370 came at the beginning of a very aggressive and widespread hybrid war that continues aggressively today. And as I've discussed in other episodes, they accomplished something which is truly even more. If you find it hard to imagine that Russia captured a plane and took it to Kazakhstan, you'll probably also find it really hard to believe that they interfered with a presidential election in order to put into office a person who was unpopular, who was not popular enough to win the popular vote, who was widely regarded as not capable of winning. And they basically staged a color revolution in the United States, put a Russian intelligence asset in the White House. That is harder for people to understand, and it's really tragic that they have a hard time understanding that.
But the barnacle evidence, the actual science, has no answer. Nobody...
This, by the way, is not a real, pretty sure that's not a real, I think that's computer generated AI.
He has explained why every single piece of MH3...
And this, by the way, is also AI generated. This is very similar to actual images of the barnacles growing on the flaperon, but it is not an actual real one.
70 debris carries months less growth than it should. Nobody has explained why 140,000 square kilometers of seabed came back empty. To the families of the 239 people on board, if any part of this was hard to hear, I'm sorry. You deserve answers. No more theories or debates.
Okay. Well, yes, I'm sorry if it was hard for you to hear. I think that one of the strangest things that people say about debates over what happened to MH370 is that they're like, oh, what you're saying is going to hurt the feelings of family members. Family members want to solve the mystery. And yes, this thing ended by saying no more debates. No, debates are how we end this mystery. Debates are how we solve the mystery. So listen, okay, overall assessment. I am kind of flattered that somebody took the time to make a piece that makes me seem overall, I think, as a dogged investigator, not a laughing stock, as they say. I feel encouraged that some of my ideas really have gotten out there. There is a real problem about this marine debris, and there's marine life, but there's also a lot of other things, and so. In coming episodes, I'm going to talk about how we can try to stitch this all together, how we can really move the ball forward. What I see, there are so many videos on YouTube right now that are like AI generated and just kind of rehashing, full of misinformation, repeating these claims like this idea about Richard Godfrey and some of his ideas. And we have to somehow be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. But I feel like the idea that at least some of these ideas are breaking through in some form is encouraging. This as we see on the screen here, 177,000 views in a month, which is more than almost any of my videos have gotten. And so that all is good. I'm glad that that somebody took the time to make this. One thing I do want to mention, a viewer named Craig Witham reached out to me by email, and he said that, he was amazed that a superstar podcaster named Chris Williamson had done the narration for this piece. And I am pretty sure that that's not the case. I don't know Chris Williamson myself. I don't know what his voice is like, but I think this is just an AI narration that has cloned his voice. It's kind of amazing and a little scary how good they're getting. Your mileage may vary. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. I would love to hear what you think about this episode. that we've been critiquing today. It is accurate that a lot of people got their feathers ruffled when my ideas got some play, both in New York Magazine and later in the Netflix documentary. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ruffle feathers. The plane is missing. It was not on the seabed where all the experts assured us it was going to be. We have to kind of break some idols here. We have to be iconoclasts and break those icons. So thank you for your time and attention. As always, check out the show page at findingmh370.com. And I will be with you pretty soon with more ideas and research about MH370. Thanks for watching.
Quality proteins aren't just for special occasions. With Omaha Steaks, you get mouth-watering proteins delivered right to your door, individually packaged and portioned, so a great dinner is just minutes away. From Taco Tuesday to a weekend feast, taste the Omaha Steaks difference. Start getting flavorful proteins delivered today. Visit omahasteaks.com and get $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, code AUDIO. Terms apply. See site for details.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.